All right. Let us do this. It is time for the burning platform. Is that Kanthan mouthing off in the background?
Indeed, it is indeed.
Good morning, Kanthan. How are you?
He's bringing his grumpy old manness into the studio.
Talking about ball sacks on the show this morning. Jeez, guys, really?
That was literally only about 30 seconds of the show.
Yeah, it was a crucial
by the way,
30
Kanthan,
seconds of the show.
It is crucial. This topic needs airing.
Guys, I'm going to tell you before we get into the grand scheme of things. Okay, I'm still slightly traumatized for learning a new word yesterday.
What was that?
It's called wake. It's called wake mezake. WAKEMEZAKA. I'm not going to tell you what it means. Go Google it, but I've been traumatized ever since. Firstly, that it exists, and secondly, that the Japanese actually have a word for it. So, yes. Oh, guys, what a time! What a time to be alive! Yes.
Oh, drinking alcohol from a woman's body. Is that it?
Yeah, drill down into it even further.
Do we have to ask Kenny Kunene? Should we just invite Kenny and ask him?
No. This is beyond Kenny. This is no.
Well, just don't tell him about it.
I don't think anything's beyond Kenny. All right, let's get into it this morning. There's a lot to talk about, and among those things, chief among them, is probably the unemployment numbers that have come out. But we'll get to that in a second, because the person who's brought the unemployment numbers to our attention is none other than a regular guest on the Burning Platform, and he is welcome, as always, to share his controversial points of view, and he has lots of them. He is Phumlani Majozi. How are you, Phumlani?
I'm well. It's great to be here. It's great to see Kanthan. You guys, we sound like we're having an exciting time here on this show.
You heard what we were talking about before.
The guy's wearing a tie. It's yes. I like that. No, it's cool. I really like that.
Phumlani is one of those old school people who dresses up when he's going to address all of us. I mean, he might not be wearing pants, but from the waist up, he looks like he's very well outfitted.
I promise you, I am wearing pants, Gareth.
Well, we just have to take your word for it.
No, we don't want to prove it. Lady and gentlemen, let's get stuck into one of the underlying massive problems in South Africa, one that often gets brushed under the carpet. People don't like to talk about it. The government has no solution for this problem. It is not something the government can technically solve. They can help create the conditions for employment, but unemployment continues to plague us. And I spoke to someone not so long ago. In fact, Kanthan, you were at this lunch. It was probably end of last year. And this guy said to us, because he has access to lots of research and statistics, he says he doesn't think the unemployment number is nearly where it is because of the informal economy. And I think we must just look at the numbers first, and then I'd like to have your comments on whether you think that is a good reflection of South Africa, or whether that's just the formal economy where people are actually reporting and where government is researching, the tax-paying, non-cash economy. So what have we got, Phumlani? What are the numbers at the moment? What are the latest unemployment numbers?
Well, the latest unemployment numbers, there was an increase of 0.2%, which went to basically meaning that the unemployment rate rose to 32.9%. So that follows from the 32.7% that we saw at the end of last year, the last quarter. Now, when you look at that unemployment rate, that's what's called the official unemployment rate, right? It excludes the number of the people who have given up looking for work. As soon as you account for the number of the people who have given up looking for work, the numbers of when it comes to unemployment in South Africa, they rise to plus 41%, right? I think about 42%.
Right.
So that tells you that, and when you do the comparison, and you look at those numbers, you compare amongst South Africa's peers in the emerging markets, we are just right at the top. So it highlights a very big problem that we have, that from an unemployment rate perspective, we are doing very badly as a country. And we have been doing badly for years. It's not something new. South Africa's unemployment rate, when you compare it over the past year, it's been rising and rising again. Now, something very interesting, Gareth, the president was speaking recently, I think somewhere in KwaZulu-Natal, where we are saying that, well, since 1994, we have created, I think he said about plus 8 million jobs or something that we have created. What he didn't account for or didn't say is that actually, when it comes to unemployment rates, our rates have increased in contrast to 1994. He never spoke about that, but he spoke about the fact that in absolute numbers terms, they have created plus 8 million jobs. So, I mean, it is a very big problem the South Africa faces, and it's something that really is constraining the economy. Now, the question is to what are the issues that lead to these very high unemployment rates is something that I hope we will delve into this hour.
No, Phumlani, I'll just give you the very short explanation. Okay, we've created 8 million jobs and we've created 20 million more people. That's a short answer.
Yeah,
and
correct.
And we know the secret of economic growth. Okay, if your economy grows at a faster rate than your population, you're going to be prosperous. If your economy grows at a slower rate than your population, then we're going to be in the shit street that we're in right now.
So we have we have an economic growth that underperforms population growth. And I think Kanthan is right. But it also highlights, because, I mean, the increase in population shouldn't automatically mean that you have a higher unemployment rate. It also highlights the failure on policy as well. I don't think we can excuse them and say that because of the increase in population, therefore, and then it makes sense to have higher unemployment rates. Yeah.
So Phumlani and Kanthan and Phumi, here's the thing. If Kanthan is right, and I have no reason to not believe him, I mean, there's a simple definition. You can Google it if you don't believe Kanthan. But are we then required to decrease the population or increase the economic activity? Because
we've got to increase economic activity. India's population has been growing as a very good example, but India's population growth is 2%. India's economic growth is 8%. That's a pathway to prosperity.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. What can the government do? Because we're all obsessed in this country with the government, and rightly so, because they are a responsible party when it comes to things like, electricity provision, for example, which is definitely the single biggest factor that is inhibiting economic growth at the moment. But what can they do? And then we'll look at what everyone else can do. What should government be doing to incentivize and push along this economy?
They need to get out of the way.
Less regulation.
We have masses of unemployed people, and we have minimum wage, which prices them out of the market. Guys, I've said for the longest time, I would rather have a scenario where in a family of 5, you have 5 people who are earning 2,000 Rand a month than one person earning 10,000 Rand a month. Because what that is doing is that it's actually spreading the base of people who are actually employed. Because remember, most people actually live in family units. We're not looking at single families where there's one breadwinner that's going out and putting food on the table. When you have a scenario where you're actually removing the price caps on labor, then you're going to have a situation where people are able to employ other people and actually get things done. Right now, the scenario that we've got, okay, let's say there's a job that's going for a minimum wage of, what is it currently, Phumi? It's about 3,500 or something like that per month. When you have that scenario, you have a job that's going for 3,500 Rand a month. You've got a woman who wants to take this job for 3,500 Rand a month, but she's a single mother, so she needs to pay someone to look after her child at home. Can she afford to pay the person looking after her child at home 3,500 a month? Absolutely not.
No.
Would that person looking after the child at home, be willing to be there for 500 Rand a month. That 500 Rand a month that person's not currently getting? Absolutely. But it's against the law. The inherent stupidity of when we have cheap and abundant labor, but we make it expensive and therefore we make it non-abundant. It is so simple, guys, to fix this. And you will have these academics that now pitch up from Stellenbosch that tell you, no, actually a minimum wage is not a problem. It does not actually hinder economic growth. Well, actually, in the first world scenario, yes. In our scenario, no.
All right, but hang on, because to be the devil's advocate this morning and just push you and Phumlani in this case a little bit further, I see a couple of comments here, and most of them are not particularly pleasant, but JP says, be like China and put a quota on the number of children you can have. Now, that's ridiculous because that's backfired horribly on China. Plus, you can't have the government. Can you imagine having to apply to this government in order to have kids? I mean, come on. I wouldn't take an instruction from Cyril Ramaphosa on whether or not I can have a child or not. Would you really want that, JP? Would you want it? Or is it one of those things that you're just saying would be okay for other people to have? Let's stop other people from having kids, but Cyril can't tell me what to do. Which is it, JP? I really need to know.
But you know what it is, Gareth? We had this. We had a letter from a listener a couple of weeks ago, also about it's also about an overburdening on small businesses of regulation, right? So it's not just about minimum wage. It's a myriad of little regulations, most of which are actually almost impossible to police. And so what the government has done is it's made every business owner the policeman of all of that. So all of the forms you have to fill in, all of every second month, the VAT you have to submit, all of every 6 months, the PAY, all of that over-regulation strangles the economy. Never mind the overburdening in terms of taxation for small businesses. So we are unable to unlock the potential in that space. So a lot more people are kind of...
Do you agree with Kanthan on minimum wage?
Say that again, please. I do think, though, that we need guardrails. So we do need guardrails in terms of exploitation of people too, because we have had this in the society that we live in. And it still happens, even as there is a minimum wage in place. It still happens that there are people, farm workers, there are people, we see it all the time, right, on social media with people who bring in helpers into their homes and underpay them horribly and have all of these crazy expectations of them. I think South Africans need to realize that sometimes you may think that you want to have a maid in your house, but you actually can't afford it. But all of that stuff, and it's too simple to just say, oh, take away minimum wage, because the government still has a duty to protect people.
Well, no, wait. Where does it say the government has a duty to protect people? Is that in our constitution? Is that a law? And they're not currently enforcing that law at any level. I don't get any protection from this government. Do any of you guys get protection from this government? No. Come on, Phumi. Those are platitudes.
Anyway,
like we've got protection. Guys, look, I want to say something about this, okay?
Before you carry on.
We've got our labor laws.
That is important.
They are good labor laws, okay? The CCMA process is a good process. Let's not confuse labor laws which protect the rights of workers with a minimum wage, which is defining to potential employers what their business should be able to afford. That's the difference. I'm a fan of the CCMA. I'm a fan of our labor laws. I spent the 80s as a trade unionist, guys. Come on, work with me on this.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, one of the very big issues that have been raised about South Africa's labor markets is the labor costs. When you look at the labor costs in contrast to, or in comparison to other markets around the world, the developing markets, South Africa is not really, the labor costs are quite high. So that's an issue that needs to be addressed. Why are we not having a competitive labor market? And then also the energy supply issue. Really, it has destroyed jobs and businesses. And the Nedbank report that was released not long time ago highlights the damage that has been done by the energy crisis that we face in the country. So there's no way we can think that we are going to have good employment numbers in an environment that is not conducive to basic things like energy supply. How do you run a business, Gareth, when electricity is off from 2 p.m. up until 5 p.m.? I mean, how do you do that? You can never run a business in such an environment. And we cannot expect to have good, job numbers in such a situation. So I think for me, it's a structural issue. Kanthan is right. I side more with Kanthan when it comes to the minimum wages. I think in a country with very much shocking unemployment rates, to have a minimum wage laws, I think it's really it's a counterproductive step.
One of the things that we don't consider when we talk about, and it's easy. What are with Kanthan? Platitudes. The thing is, one of the things that we don't consider when we talk about the unemployment rates that we also have in this country, and something that is completely and grossly underreported, is also the level of education that we have. So where you have in like our country, where only 34% of kids who start school finish school. Even if you opened a factory in Pietermaritzburg today that could hire 5,000 people or even 15,000 people, most of those young people that are sitting there unemployed, you are unable to employ them because they are undereducated, even for a factory job. These, and this is the thing for me, is that it is not one particular string that you have to pull and then it unravels the whole thing. There are so many complexities that we have to consider in South Africa.
I totally agree with you, Phumi. But we do have, Kanthan, we do have a bunch of unemployable people. Like, that there are people who are so uneducated and who have such hardware problems in terms of their brains that they probably can't do any good. They can only do damage. I mean, most of them work in politics, but we'll just leave that aside for a second. The real problem here is that we don't have a handle on the informal economy. And I think it's something worth talking about. I opened up this conversation by saying, what do you think the real number is? Do you really think it's as high as 30, 40%?
Yes.
Or do you?
I think it's probably higher.
But do you think people are just sitting around, that they've given up on work, which Phumlani mentioned earlier, that they aren't even trying? Nobody's sitting around. I don't see people sitting around. I see people trying whatever they can, hustling, selling this, cutting that, changing that, offering this paint job, this piece job. I see people trying really hard to do things to earn money.
So trying hard to earn money is different, because the thing is, the formal economy trickles down into the informal economy, where we have, what is our current growth rate is 0.00001%. There is no trickle down effect. And we've also spoken a little bit on the show about the incredibly high salaries that certain executives get, as opposed to some of their lower paid workers, or even the middle paid workers in those organizations. The trickle down effect. So the trickle down effect does not happen as much as you. Kanthan made the example earlier of wanting to employ a person who's willing to take a job at the 3,500, but then needs to get somebody to stay home to look after. That is where the trickle down happens. The person that stays at home to look after your kid, or the person that drives your kid to school, or does all of those. We don't have the trickle down effect. I think the number is way higher than is being reported right now. That's why we sit here and we talk. I say it's higher. That's why we sit here and we talk about the fact that 30 million South Africans live on less than 20 Rand a day. That's why that is the statistic.
I want to keep us focused here. That's all valuable information, especially that last bit that you mentioned on how little people are living on a day. All right. But I think to bring in the rich people at the far end of this is not going to help. I mean, it's not going to. It's not as relevant. So we've already figured out. Let's just recap where we are, because I don't want us to lose our way in this conversation and end up talking about a bunch of irrelevant stuff. First of all, we admit number one big problem in the economy is electricity. You can't possibly run a business. Phumlani, you contributed this one. You can't run a business where you don't have a reliable electricity supply. Number two, we have an uneducated, unemployable population. There are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of South Africans who are not capable of being employed in the economy because they cannot perform any useful task or service. Nothing. They are outside of it and always will be. They're basically going to be left to their own devices, which is terrifying. The third thing that we've brought up is the fact that we have laws and regulations that are onerous and cumbersome. Do you guys agree with a lot of people in the comments here who say that part of that onerous red tape environment that we've created that inhibits the economy is BEEE?
Absolutely.
I never remember how
Absolutely. Absolutely. The people who end up getting rich from BEE regulations are the people who are there to police the regulations.
The consultants who make sure that you
Yes.
have the right BEE certification. But also, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, that was signed into law by Cyril Ramaphosa, is also the fact that businesses that I think are under 50 people, is it 50 people? I think it's businesses that are under 50 people. The level of the level of regulation that they are put to scrutiny is exactly the same, no matter how much they make. So if you have 50 people and you make 5 billion, and if you have 50 people and you make 10 million, you have the same level of scrutiny, right? So what's possible, what we're probably going to see is we're going to see a lot of businesses unbundling into smaller groups where they don't have to stick to a particular regulation around all of this BEE. And the people who suffer are always going to be the little guy. So those regulations, BEE regulations, even I, as a Black woman today, I don't have a company that's a level 1 BEE. Because what BEE regulations want from you is all sorts of things that you actually, if you are a small business, you actually cannot reach the status that you think you need to reach, that they tell you you need to reach. So you are kept out of the economy. Doesn't work. It maybe it could have worked if it had been implemented in a particular way all those many years ago. But where we sit today, it's just one more hurdle that people have to jump through that doesn't work.
So Phumlani, what's your solution?
When it comes to BEE, I've said that, if you were to repeal BEE tomorrow, really, I doubt there would be people in townships and poor communities, protesting against the repeal of BEE. But the people who would make noise would be the elite in the media, who would tell you that we need BEE for XY reasons. Black people are still left behind, and so on, trying to justify a policy that has been counterproductive. So, and that alone would really be a sign to show that who is really more concerned about BEE. It's not the little man in South Africa on the ground who has never benefited anything from BEE. It's the elite, because the elite themselves have been the biggest beneficiaries of BEE policies. So my view is that what BEE has done, and I'm currently reading Andre de Ruyter's new book, Truth to Power, and these problems, you can see them in a company like Eskom. That the whole BEE process was sort of repressive and constraining in terms of ensuring that the company operates efficiently. So it has been a constraint that has repressed the economic productivity, and I think it's something that needs to be reversed from our government.
Let me ask you a specific question here, everybody, because we talk about BEE, but most people don't know what the rules are. Cyril has just introduced a new rule where basically, if you're a business with under 50 people, you can still employ whites. But if you're over 50 people, you're not allowed to employ a white person. I mean, it's in black and white. This is the most outrageous, kind of discrimination we've had in 28, 30 years. This is outrageous that now they're telling you cannot employ people of a specific skin color. It's really that's out of control.
I see Carl Dos Santos in the comments is saying, don't confuse, I think is the word that he wants to say, BEE with employment equity. I think one of the things that a lot of people have missed is the fact that those broad-based Black economic empowerment codes as they look different in different sectors, really have 7 areas in which they operate. So when you talk about BE, it encompasses employment equity. So one area will be about ownership, one area will be about management and executive control, one area will be about employment equity. There is an area about sustainable economic development. It also includes the area of where you spend your CSI. It also would include what they call so how you spend your money. So procurement, basically, how and where you spend your money. So it makes everybody the police of everybody. So if in your company you have 5 suppliers, you need to police those 5 suppliers for their BEE. And those suppliers, we were talking about trickling down, and so on and so on and so forth, as a former president used to say. So all of those things, so the employment equity aspect, which is the law that I was also talking about earlier, which is what, if you have 50 people or less, whether you make $1 billion or whether you make $1 million or 500,000, those laws are all the same for everybody. And so the employment equity component of it has been reshifted in this way.
I'm sorry, I just want to get into specifics here. This is an absolute outrage. Here's the Employment Equity Act, list of economic sectors and all the rest of it. Much worse than I expected. Here are the affected industries. This is according to a tweet. Any companies with 50 plus employees in these industries can basically have 3.5% white female and 4.5% white male employees. I mean, this is unbelievably stupid. Are we all agreed on that front?
We all do agree. I do agree. Well, Gareth, I don't want to be my point here, and I want your audience to get me here. I'm very much opposed to racial affirmative action, right? I'm not against the government helping the people who are disadvantaged in the country. But what they should focus on is to help people not because of the color of their skin, right? If you have some program where you want to upgrade the poor or to uplift them, don't focus on their race. Create programs that are for everybody, so that you avoid having people who are already well off benefiting from certain systems of government simply because of the color of their skin, right? So those things, I think, for me, I need to be clear that I'm not opposed to government helping or extending a hand to people who are disadvantaged, but it should not be done because of the color of their skin. And there must be some criteria that use that non-racial to address the issues.
I agree with all of that. I agree with all of that, Phumlani, but I'm just absolutely gobsmacked and dumbfounded. In the year 2023, Tula Singlesi can click his fingers and decide how many Indians, how many coloreds, and how many whites and how many blacks you, Phumi, and Kanthan and I can employ. I mean, this is just unbelievable. Joseph Stalin would be applauding this from the sidelines if he were alive.
Hendrik Vervoet would be dancing in
Hendrik Vervoet would be thrilled. This is his fucking wet dream, this whole idea. And Tulas can do this without capriciously, without any information, without any research. He can basically say, oh no, we've reduced that number, or we've improved that number, or we've increased that number, with nobody telling you why, when, or wherefore. Do these people not understand how businesses work?
Guys, the fundamental problem, and I keep coming back to this, we should not be pointing fingers at people like Tulas or like Ibrahim or like Praveen or anyone in the lower echelon. This all goes back to Cyril. Okay. This all goes back to Cyril. This happens under his watch with his complicity. And the way in which you fix this is by concentrating on the fact that Cyril doesn't have a clue and is allowing everyone to do whatever they want that contradicts what other departments are doing, which is why we have the absurd situation where he has to have a minister of electricity when he already has a minister of energy and a minister of public enterprises.
Crazy.
And all of this is doing nothing but adding to the fundamental dysfunction of the state.
And
but I think it's great.
Yeah, it's not clear. It's not clear, Kanthan, as to who was. I heard that this Minister of Electricity basically it's not clear what his powers are. So how to appoint a minister as a president without knowing what his powers will be? I mean, that shows you a state that is totally confused, a state that doesn't know what it's doing. And it's sad. It's very sad. I mean, it just doesn't make sense how to appoint someone without knowing what his powers will be.
You know, one of the things that Cyril, and whether Cyril knows what he's doing, there's nobody at the wheel driving. But one of the things that you see with this Employment Equity Restructuring Act, as I like to call it, is the fact that we now effectively have in Parliament, because it doesn't just go through cabinet, these kinds of things, it has to go through the entire parliamentary process. We have a bunch of people there who don't have any new ideas, who don't have it. So they're tinkering. They're just going back and tinkering. We had this type of a thing. Now we're shifting it a little bit. Now we're adding this. Now we're taking this away from it. They don't have new thinking to solve the problems we have at hand. And it's, I mean, Cyril being the CEO effectively is where the buck should stop, and he is the person that we should hold most accountable. But it just says to us that it's everybody in all of those seats don't have the ideas. They're not fighting it back.
Bring Kanthan in as a minister.
Yeah, well, trust me, that would help, but I don't think he wants the job anymore. All right, so guys, let's just move into something else, because we are on Cyril, and it does kind of segue nicely into this Russia, US, South Africa problem that we have at the moment. And they say it's all been resolved. I mean, they're telling us everything's fine, guys. Nothing to see here. Sofikile Mbalula, who I really follow for comic relief, but occasionally it does drive me a little bit up the wall. I saw him meeting with the US Ambassador Brigitte, and the two of them seemed to be in good spirits. Just a couple of days ago, America accused Russia and South Africa of basically a bit of an arms deal on the side. South Africa supplying Russia with arms in their ongoing conflict with Ukraine. We've declared that we are neutral, that we are not taking a side in this, which is an interesting thing because we've definitely been more friendly to Russia than to Ukraine. What would the effects of any of this be? And are any of you concerned about this? We'll start with you, Phumlani, because I have a feeling I know what Kanthan's going to say, although he can surprise us at the best of times. And I think I know what Phumi feels about this. What do you think?
Well, we have said we are neutral in weights. This is my observation. We have said we are neutral in weights, but in actions, I don't think we have shown some that neutrality. Firstly, I don't believe that it's a lie that we have that there were some arms that were given to Russia. I given the record of my government, the ANC government, it's likely that is true. So I don't believe that's a lie. And then we had we've been sort of very close in terms of the drills that we have been doing with Russia. Not long ago. So, my honest view is that we've been very much confused when it comes to foreign policy. We haven't really been able to be strategic, especially given the conflicts that are going on around the world. I don't believe that we should be involved in a power struggle. That's not my sense. I don't believe in that because we are. I mean, it's just something that we cannot afford. But
yeah, but Phumlani, I just need to climb in at this point. Okay, we shouldn't be discussing beliefs. We should be discussing facts. So just tell me what facts you have relating to this thing, because I think that's the crucial thing for us. We spend far too much time talking about what we believe, instead of actually saying, this is what happened, here's why it's a problem, and here's how we go about fixing it. So what are the facts around this matter?
Okay,
whatever
so for
me,
So for me, my honest view is that it's not only just the Ramaphosa administration, right? Even under Jacob Zuma, South Africa has sided more with Russia and China. When you look at even the voting a record at the UN. We've been siding more with those countries, and we have also even not been. We haven't even condemned even the actions of brutal governments like governments of Myanmar, right, or people that abuse the people. We have never been, taken a side where we condemn those situations. The idea that we can continue to show this we can continue to show this cordial sort of relationship with Russia, to me, it doesn't make sense, right? We should be in a position where we say we are opposed to the invasion of Ukraine, and that we condemn their actions, but of course we'll continue to engage and to find a solution to the situation of Ukraine-Russia war. So I don't think our government has done that. And it's not just the Ramaphosa government. It's the ANC policy of failing to condemn the actions of very much human rights abuses, and not being able to come out forcefully to say we oppose certain situations. So when it comes to asking me about the facts about the issue of these arms that it's believed were sold to Russians, I'm saying that given the record of our government, though of course the matter is still being investigated, but given how corrupt our system is, I wouldn't be surprised that there were people who were facilitating that process. I wouldn't be surprised.
All right. So now let me just give a factual basis that takes us back through a few generations of ANC policy. Let's start off with the Mandela administration, where we had the butcher of Nigeria, Sani Abacha, who executed Ken Saro-Wiwa, a journalist who was reporting on the exploitative practices of the oil companies that were devastating people in the regions where the oil was being extracted. Ken Saro-Wiwa was executed. Nelson Mandela stood up on every public platform, condemned the role of Sani Abacha, called for then at the time it was the Organization of African Unity to pull together and to actually isolate Nigeria. And what happened? The rest of the Organization of African Unity ended up pulling together and essentially putting Mandela on the sidelines. They were not prepared to go through with the process of actually taking a stance on this. And the reason why that becomes entirely ineffective is because everyone has those small and yana skeletons, Phumi, that every country has those. And if you start this process of condemning, it doesn't work. Then we had the Thabo Mbeki administration. And Mbeki embarked on what the media started talking about as quiet diplomacy. The media are idiots. There's only two types of diplomacy. There's diplomacy and there's gunboat diplomacy, because diplomacy by definition is quiet and it takes place behind the scenes. And there's a lot of stuff that actually took place under Thabo Mbeki's watch that actually quietly contributed to stuff that went on around the world. And, we can talk, for example, about the entire role that South Africans played, including Rolf Meyer and Cyril Ramaphosa, by the way, in brokering of peace in the Irish conflict. So that's the second phase. Then we get to the Jacob Zuma era, where Jacob Zuma, his Minister of Foreign Affairs, Maite Nkwana Mashabane, was representing South Africa on the international front, agreed to the establishing of a no-fly zone over Libya because they had not bothered reading the fine print, but effectively sided with the United States in that. And what was the end result of that? It ended up with the toppling of Gaddafi's government. So there's no consistent pattern out here of the ANC taking sides, Phumlani. These are facts that I'm putting out. Now, for the first time, I believe that international relations that we have right now under Naledi Pandor is probably the most competent that we've had to date. And the very simple example I'll give of it is that if you look in terms of what went down, the situation in Sudan fairly recently, where you had the British who were only able to evict their ambassadorial personnel from the battlefield. And meanwhile, you had South Africa, who was not only managing to extradite the South African nationals who were trapped there. They took out Lesotho nationals, they took out Namibian nationals, South Africa was being truly a global player out there. So I'm saying all of this now as a background because the media consistently tries to portray what happens under various ANC administrations as a series of associations with Russia and with China. And that is absolutely not the case. Now, the questions that I asked around this Russian ship landing, okay, first question was, what type of weaponry do we have that's compatible with Russian equipment and training? Okay, because our purportedly corrupt arms deal imported weapons from the West. All of the stuff that used to be manufactured by Denel with the backing of Arms Corps was all designed to NATO spec. Okay, and is incompatible. All right. So second thing is, where do we have artillery stockpiles to be able to be redeployed? There's a series of reports over the year. Look at Defense Web; it'll tell you that our artillery stocks have been looted and pillaged over the years. Okay. Third thing is that we had joint training exercises with the Russians and the Chinese in February. If there was a time to do a transfer of arms, that would have been the easy way to do it, instead of having a ship basically dock in the dead of night. And I also make the point that if someone takes the trouble to go through the stuff that Denel actually manufactures now, what type of equipment do we have that could potentially in any way assist Russia in terms of the war that they are fighting right now? So, and the final thing is that this ambassador is the same ambassador who last year said that there was going to be a terrorist attack in Sandton. Okay. And
Yeah,
again,
that's right.
that caused market fluctuations. Okay. The guy's a lying fuck. Let's be very clear about this. Okay. And the net impact of what he did was to crash the rand.
All right. So then I have to ask two questions. First of all, Kanthan, I have no reason to doubt anything that you're saying is probably more accurate than anything we're hearing from the stupid media, because they never ask the right questions. But if it's true that, you know, we have nothing that Russia would want and that this doesn't look like it's a real thing, then why has our government not been better at communicating that this is bullshit to the average person here or in America or in Russia?
Who in our government is good at anything, really?
Well, you said Naledi
Good at
Pandor is probably running she's probably running the most competent international relations department we've had in a long time. And
part of
the
the
land
reason
of
for
the
that
blind,
is,
the one-eyed is king. I mean, really.
But part of the reason for that is that Clayson Monyela is a former ETV trained journalist, because he worked for ETV under my watch. And he's a competent communicator, and he keeps the debate out in the open, and everything is there managed quite flawlessly. That happens to be the reason. Everyone else, you know, their communicators actually kind of just and oh. Like Corinne Jean-Pierre, you know, she's have you guys ever watched her?
I think we're talking about a lot of things that all sound like there's a really good and sane way of looking through all of this. But I think if there is one thing that I must agree completely with you, Kanthan, is that this entire charade, which we have seen with the American ambassador and the supposed apology, non-apology that has been issued, is that it was to crash the rand. But more than that, I think it's definitely an American ploy, because if they are indeed looking at BRICS and looking at BRICS as being a terrible idea and an idea that moves a very big chunk of the world away from their dollar standard, then what they definitely don't want, and as we see South Africa veering more and more and getting deeper into the BRICS, and also Naledi Pandor did say, you know, one of the reasons why it is worth looking at the moving away from the dollar is because I don't believe that her strengthening other currencies, as she said it, then it is in America's interest that South Africa goes down, because we, South Africa being the most sophisticated economy on the continent, what the Americans don't want is they don't want China and Russia inheriting this economy and what it means and the voice that it has on the entire continent. And we see this, right? So if we see in the last OAU and how South Africa got everybody to eventually agree to and evicting the Israelis out of the meeting, South Africa still has a large voice on the continent. And they don't want that. America doesn't want that. So this it's within America's interest to crush us and crash our economy. Because we are a sophisticated economy.
Guys,
Yeah.
just before we swing fully to the economy, I just want to put in a last word in terms of this Russian docking thing. So Guy Lamb, who is a criminologist out at Stellenbosch, has written a very good piece at The Conversation. I urge people to go out there and take a look at it. Okay, and the very simple thing that he says, the South African Minister of Defense, Thandi Modise, has stated that the Lady Ark docked in Simonstown in December 2022 to deliver a shipment of ammunition for the South African National Defense Forces Special Forces Regiment that has been ordered prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And he goes on to say, indeed, the Arms Control Committee's 2019 Arms Import Report lists the permit approval for the import of 5 million rounds of Russian ammunition to South Africa.
Is Lawrence Mbata back from Russia, by the way? For those of you who don't know who Lawrence Mbata is, he's the head of our military, and he's on he's the chief of our army, and he's out there in Russia on a military visit.
Guys, let's just try and focus on this, okay? But I urge all of you who think that you know what's going on. Yes, we know we have a corrupt government. Yes, we know that the ANC will steal at every conceivable opportunity. But the idea that the ANC, A, has the capability of producing arms, and B, that the Russians would actually need it, is ludicrous.
We'll never know, Kanthan. Let's wait for the investigation. But all I'm saying is that given the record of what we know about our government,
Phumlani, I'm saying that Guy Lamb has detailed this on The Conversation. Go look at it. The problem is that when we operate on the basis of beliefs rather than trying to drill down into facts, we end up with this never-ending cycle.
Let's wait for the government.
My facts are more important than my feelings.
Yeah, but I'm saying that let's wait because they've appointed the judge, right, or to do the investigation. Let's see what comes out.
That's going to be another Zondo commission. All of the stuff that Guy Lamb's talking about is in the public domain. We shouldn't be deferring to authority on everything. We have access to facts ourselves. We can do research.
You're basically telling us, and I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but you're saying, don't believe this US ambassador. He's talking complete nonsense, and he's trying to tank the rand.
Exactly.
He has tanked it. What do you mean he's trying to tank it? Have you seen the rand dollar exchange?
Okay, no, I think that's fascinating, because honestly, this is again why these insights on this show are so varied and so useful, because I think we do tend to accept the mainstream media narrative way too often without actually investigating the first principles. And Phumlani, I don't know if this is as shocking to you as it is to me, but what Kanthan's saying is pretty bloody earth-shattering.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it could be something that is very damaging to the country. But I think for South Africa going forward, I think messaging has to be correct. It has to be right, especially on a global stage, on how we would position ourselves. Of course, I mean, the idea that there will always be some foreign interventions or people trying to tank the economy for their own purpose, that is going to happen. It's how the international system works. You always have people who are trying to discredit you as a country. But so long as you take the stances and the lines that are principles, that are consistent, and that are strategic as well, that's going to help. So we shall see how this thing evolves over the next months or so.
We have a self-serving president who's going to take us all down with him at this stage. We do. We have a self-serving president. And I think it also serves him for all of us to look at him and think that he is weak, or he is surrounded by all of these forces within the ANC. Therefore, he can't make any moves. I don't believe any of that. I think he knows exactly what it is that he's doing. And what he is doing is his self-enriching. And at this point, the Americans have called his called his bullshit on it,
Right.
and he is now preparing to save himself.
Can I quickly just turn our attention, since you brought up America, and we can never avoid the elephant in the room. Any comments on the Durham report, which has just come out? I mean, this is really a very damning indictment of the FBI, of the Hillary Clinton campaign, and kind of makes it look like Donald Trump was telling the truth all along about an active campaign in the deep state to prevent him from becoming president, and then once he was president, to try and remove him by hook or by crook. I mean, this is beyond Watergate. It's beyond Watergate. Watergate, at least Nixon hired outside actors to go and break into the Democrats' offices in the Watergate building. In this case, the FBI, the state itself under Barack Obama, was put to work against an opposition candidate. I mean, why is this not making more noise?
Because this goes back to what we were just talking about and what Phumlani was touching on, where he was saying that the optics need to be right in terms of the rest of the world. Right now, the war that's being fought in the Ukraine, which goes directly back to what's going on in the US, it is a war where the media has been weaponized in order to push particular narratives. And I can't say this strongly enough. The entire way in which the media has been reporting on a whole range of things all fundamentally goes back to pushing a deep state narrative that is designed to push out specific people. We spoke on this show, guys, over the past several weeks, where I said the divide in the US right now is not between the Republicans and the Democrats. It's between the Trump Republicans and the deep state Republicans. And now we've got the second follow-up along the same lines within the Democratic Party, where you have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is now running for president, who is effectively now the Trump of the Democratic Party, right, because he's saying a lot of things that Trump is saying. And the deep state now is going to be on a quest to take out Robert Kennedy as well. So they're now fighting two battles, because you have two people who are singing from the same hymn sheet and talking about the dangers of the American deep state. So the Durham report in of itself doesn't matter. What actually matters is who ends up getting into the White House. And right now, I promise you, the deep state is going out of their way to ensure that Biden gets another term. And they want Biden to get another term because it means that they can continue to do exactly the stuff that they have been doing up until now.
Yeah, look, for me, I think I'll be short here. The reason why, because your question, Gareth, was why this is not earth-shattering or making big headlines. Well, it's because it was the governmental system doing it on the Republicans and to Trump at worse. So if it were the other way around, if this thing was aimed at Democrats, then I'm telling you the mainstream media would have made a lot of noise because largely the mainstream media is very much something that is a mouthpiece of the Democratic Party in the United States. It's anti-Republican, it's anti-Trump, it's the conservative political movement is always demonized and thrown under the bus by the machines of the media that is largely Democratic or is run by people of the Democratic Party, and even the journalists, they are more pro-Democratic Party. So it's not a surprising thing that it's not a big thing, as you're saying. I'm not surprised by that because anyway, the mainstream media is always shooting down on the Republicans or the conservative movement. Now, that's my observation.
Okay. Phumi, you got the closing remarks on this
While
one.
we yap ourselves about mainstream media being an agent of... Look, I think...
At least the burning platform is not the mainstream media.
While we yap ourselves. But I think we've spoken about this before, and I think maybe this is a good place to end this show. It's important to look at more than just what is in front of our eyes. It's important to be in order to be able to decipher what it is that's going on. You're not just going to get it from the regular sources. It's not going to be from Clayson's Twitter feed. It's not going to be from the Twitter feed of the SG, Figile Mbalola. It's got to be from all sides. And then you've got to consider not just what's happening today, but what has happened in the past and where we are going to, and how. And, again, we talk a lot on this show about how South Africa is not just a small island at the toe, a small piece at the toe of Africa, but really very connected to the rest of the world, and still has quite a huge role, I think, on the continent as well. And so is often going to be the grass that suffers when the elephants fight.
All righty, everybody. Sure. Busy show. We've jumped all over the place. I hope it's been, I hope you feel like the grass that's been suffering while the elephants fight this morning. We will be back with another Burning Platform next week, Thursday. Phumlani, it's always good to see you. Thanks for being on the show. Kanthan, great to see you. And Phumi, as always, we'll see you next week, everybody. Ciao. Bye-bye.